Whenever the topic of cannabis and health comes up, it feels like we're stuck in this endless tug of war. Is it good for you or bad for you? But the real story? Well, it's so much more nuanced and honestly, a lot more fascinating than that.
So this is the big question, right? Is cannabis a miracle medicine or is it a dangerous menace? We all want a simple yes or no answer, and that's totally understandable. But trying to find one, that's probably the biggest mistake we can make when we're trying to really understand this plant. Because the real answer, the one that's actually useful, isn't a simple yes or no. It's buried in the science. You see, cannabis has this dual nature. It has the power to help, and it absolutely has the power to harm. So in this explainer, we're going to get into the weeds, literally, and break down exactly how and why. All right, so to really wrap our heads around this, we've got to start with its two most important, most famous active ingredients. These two molecules, they are the key to unlocking pretty much all of the plant's effects on our bodies. So think of it like this. On one hand, you've got THC. That's the compound that produces the famous high. And on the other hand, you've got CBD, which is non-psychoactive. It acts more like a helper inside the body. They both come from the very same plant, but, and this is the key, they behave in radically different ways. Okay, and this is where it gets really cool. THC works because it binds directly to special receptors in our brain. That's what creates the intoxicating effect, the high. But CBD, it does things differently. It doesn't cause that intoxication because it works more indirectly, kind of nudging our body's systems back into balance. This fundamental difference is why they have such wildly different uses and risks. So what are these systems they're interacting with? Well, it's called the endocannabinoid system, or the ECS for short. The best way to think about it is like this. Your body already has all these natural receptor locks everywhere, and they're constantly working to regulate things like your mood, your memory, pain signals, all of it. Cannabinoids like THC and CBD are basically like keys from the cannabis plant that happen to fit into those locks, and when they do, they can influence how those systems work. Okay, so with that in mind, let's look at the good side first. Where is this interaction actually provably beneficial? We're going to start with the medical uses that are backed by the absolute strongest scientific evidence. And this right here, this is the gold standard. We're not talking about anecdotal claims, we're talking about the FDA. They have approved medications based on either purified CBD or synthetic versions of THC. These are drugs that have gone through rigorous testing and have been proven to be safe and effective for treating some very specific and severe conditions, like rare forms of childhood epilepsy and the awful nausea that comes with chemotherapy. And it's not just those specific prescription drugs. The National Academies of Sciences, a really big deal. They've looked at all the research and found there's substantial, conclusive evidence for a few other key areas. The strongest evidence points to its effectiveness for chronic pain, for the muscle spasms in MS, as well as that nausea and those seizure disorders we just mentioned. So the big takeaway here is that the therapeutic potential is very, very real, and it's scientifically validated. But like I said, that's only half the story. We absolutely have to pivot now and look at the other side of this coin, the significant evidence-backed health risks. And these are primarily driven by THC. Okay, and this right here is probably one of the most important things to understand. The cannabis that's common today is not the same stuff from 30 years ago. Not even close. The average THC potency has jumped from around 4% to 15% or even higher. This is a huge deal because we know that higher potency is directly linked to a much higher risk of harm. And this chart, wow, it really visualizes one of the most serious risks we're talking about. There is a strong, dose-dependent link between using high-potency THC often and the risk of developing psychosis, like schizophrenia. For someone who might already be vulnerable, daily use of high-potency cannabis can be the thing that pushes them over the edge. And when it comes to the developing brain, the science is crystal clear. There is zero debate on this one. From the Surgeon General to every major public health body, the consensus is unanimous. The chemicals in cannabis can seriously disrupt critical brain development, a process that continues all the way until our mid-20s. Then there's the risk of addiction, or what clinicians call cannabis use disorder. A lot of people think it's a harmless substance you can't get addicted to, but the data just doesn't back that up. About 3 in 10 users, so 30%, develop some form of this disorder, and that means a pattern of use that causes real problems and impairment in their day-to-day lives. And believe it or not, the list of well-documented risks just keeps growing. We now have emerging evidence pointing to a significant increase in the risk of heart attack and stroke, especially soon after use. There's also the acute cognitive impairment, things like memory and coordination, and this really bizarre paradoxical syndrome that can cause severe, uncontrollable vomiting in long-term heavy users. So what do we do with all this information, right? We've got these incredible benefits on one side and these really serious harms on the other. Well, it turns out that the final outcome, whether it's helpful or harmful, often comes down to the choices we make about how we use it. And this brings us to a really, really important concept: the risk trade-off. Here's the bottom line. There is no completely safe way to consume cannabis. Every single method, smoking, vaping, edibles, you name it, simply swaps one set of risks for another. I mean, just take a look at this comparison. If you smoke it, sure, you get fast effects and it's easy to control your dose, but you're trading that for long-term lung damage. So you think, okay, I'll switch to edibles to save my lungs. Great. But now you're trading that risk for a much higher risk of accidental overdose because the effects take forever to kick in and then they last for hours and hours. It's a classic risk trade-off. So what this all does is it gives us a really clear framework for how to think about this for ourselves. You can make a personal risk-benefit analysis. And it all comes down to 4 key questions. 1, the compound itself. Are we talking about high THC or high CBD? 2, the potency. How strong is it? 3, the user. What's your age? What's your health profile? And 4, the purpose. Are you using this as a medicine under a doctor's care, or is it for recreation? So you see, we started by asking, is it good or bad? But that was never really the right question to begin with. The real, more sophisticated, and much more useful question we should be asking ourselves is this: for whom is it beneficial? For what specific purpose? And at what potential risk? That's where the true understanding really lies.